Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, the podcast, Season 7, Episode 8, The Lodging Place. I'm Monty, your host and author. Last episode, if you'll remember, the Stevens family had an opportunity to visit the wedding venue. Today, we're going to start with Chapter 38, Final Preparations. The kitchen. The menu for the big event was minimal compared to others held in the same venue. The bride and groom had made it perfectly clear it was to be display over content, which, when asked, they both told go big with ice sculptures, place settings, table flowers, etc. But the food was to be simple. For example, Mr. Smith had only requested chicken tenders, fries, and ranch dressing. The bride, an elegant salad made with only ingredients from her home country, as well as a cake made from the berry of the most popular tree on her planet. For them, she had pronounced it kahacha. It looked like a snail and a raspberry had a baby, according to some of the funnier kitchen staff. But when they were brave enough to try it, they were pleasantly surprised. The cake had been made 7 times before they finally had the winner. While they were all excellent at what they did, when using new ingredients for the first time and being told to use as little sugar as possible because the visitors were only used to natural sugar in their diets, well, it took a while to get it right. They had taken the liberty of making some pastries with the berries as well. Also a fruit punch, using the berries, zero sugar Gatorade, and mint. According to the kitchen manager, Beverly, they were on point and ready for the big day. The grounds crew. Jack took pride in how well maintained his team kept the grounds. The wedding was just another event for them to do what they did every day. The only difference? They had been asked to add a row of special flowers to each side of the path leading to the wedding venue. The flowers were native to XK593 and were said to bring good luck if they bloomed on the day of the blessed event. Jack and Butch had made sure the flowers were handled with care, spaced properly, and taken care of per instructions that accompanied them with the transport. They had arrived at the same time as Fancy. What they had not been able to accomplish to date was to ensure the flowers would bloom on the special day. Some had already bloomed and would be replaced at the last minute. The extras that had been sent were staying in a dark place at approximately 64 degrees as instructed. This was the only thing making the pair nervous. If the flowers didn't bloom, could an intergalactic war be waged? They sure hope not. The banquet team. When it comes to requests and out of the ordinary instructions, the team that made up the banquet squad had heard and read a lot. So there was no surprise when they were told not to look at any of the guests directly in the eye, only to speak if spoken to, and that guests would be fed first and the wedding party last. And lastly, to make plans for a lot of drinking. Cases upon cases of wine and strong alcoholic beverages had been transported weeks earlier, all inventoried and kept under lock and key. Compared to the guest list, the number of bottles delivered would mean every guest, young and old, would have to consume approximately 5 bottles. Security. As with all departments, training was constant, and for this event, it had been taken up a notch. There were rehearsal after rehearsal, contingency plans in place for what ifs, and backup plans to the contingency plans. They had also been told, just like the banquet team, about the rules of engaging the visitors. They too had been told of the drinking that would inevitably take place. And in fire-breathing dragons and a wedding floor that was suspended 4 stories above the ground, what could possibly go wrong? Every event had its special circumstances, and this was no exception. Therefore, they would train, rehearse, and look for any flaws right up until the last visitor stepped their foot off the grounds. William. William had a checklist galore, and more checklists for those checklists. While his primary responsibility was make sure the day-to-day operations ran smoothly, that also entailed making sure their guests were comfortable and all their requests had been met. So, reservations had been gone over numerous times. Cottage assignments, arrival schedules, special requests, all checked and rechecked. When the guests were scheduled to arrive, he would be moving between the arrival desk and the reception area, making sure it was all smooth and stress-free as possible. Outside, he was calm and controlled. Inside, he was a walking earthquake. Trent. The new GM was processing as much as he could. He had more questions written down than he had answers, but he knew his teams were working so hard to make sure everything went as planned. He would continue to learn and make himself available where and when needed. Leonardo. Leonardo spent much of his day attending meetings after meetings that were being held throughout the day. He'd be asked questions and he would answer, only speaking when asked a direct question. No one had asked him the question he had hoped to answer before now. He struggled at times with his position in the universe. He was smart and knew things, but he was also a lesser, which meant he could only use the wisdom and knowledge when asked. It could be a cruel existence. Mr. Whitmore. From far away, he kept up with all things taking place, from the meetings to the tours and everything in between. Based on this fact, he was fairly confident the wedding and all the festivities were in good hands. It was the other thing that kept him up at night. He would need to have a conversation with Trent soon, but he didn't look forward to it. He was in fact dreading it, and it had been a long time since he had dreaded anything. Kay still had no interest in making the trip. The love for his daughter was the only thing strong enough to take him away from XK593 at such a crucial time in their history. The bride and groom? Well, they had not been heard of for a while, so it was assumed they were doing well. The old adage, no news was good news. Chapter 39. A Secret Told. It was 2 days after the tour that Trent Sash let him know that Mr. Whitmore would like a meeting with him for a private lunch in his office, located in the Universal Building. It would be his first meeting at the prestigious building, and for that alone, he was curious. But at a private lunch, and Trent was imagining every scenario except the one that he was not prepared for. Directions had been sent to his sash, so Trent only had to follow the pleasant voice that led him to something Trent thought. He had not told the family about the meeting. He did not want them to worry, as he was. I hoped it was just, how are you settling in, meeting. But he didn't have that feeling, that vibe. When he was only a few feet from the closed door, he heard Mr. Whitmore's sash announce his arrival. It was kind of weird. The door was immediately opened by an AI robot that took a quick scan and then welcomed him. The corner table was set for two, and a second robot was taking lids off smoked salmon and steamed broccoli. Mr. Whitmore finished a call and then stood to greet his guest. Trent, thank you so much for making the time to see me. I was told you liked the chef's smoked salmon, so I took the liberty. I hope that's okay. That's fine. The chef does a wonderful job. So the meeting, it's just the two of us? Yes, the subject matter is, well, delicate. So I prefer there's nothing that's going to leave this room. That's why we're using C3P and R2D. He laughed. We're fans of Star Wars, if you're just finding that out. The lunch conversation was light, and Trent was sensing that his boss was looking for the right opportunity to bring up whatever was about to be laid on him. It was after the talk of dragons that Mr. Whitmore said, Trent, you're military and police background. How good were you? Sir? I'm sorry. Forgive me for being so blunt. Let me back up and tell you a little story. Then you'll see why I have to ask such a question. For the next 40 minutes, Trent listened intently while Mr. Whitmore told him a tale that was made for the movies. In short, the planet XK593 was heading to war in the near future unless something changed, and it was doubtful that it would. The top scientists of the planet had discovered a rare and radioactive element that they called AST for short. This element had wide medical benefits that had not been explored by others. To date, the scientists on Earth used the element for treating thyroid and cancer, but it was rare and unstable and expensive. EK593 had found that they had discovered a way to stabilize the element, thus keeping it from decaying, and had found uses reaching further than had been used before. It was being described as a live extender by the experts of XK593. It was said the new research had shown healing powers beyond what any medicine could accomplish, particularly in caring for the wounded after battle. The problem? XK593 had very limited access to the element, and it actually purchased quantities from other planets at the beginning of their research. Now, with the discovery, they had no intention of purchasing more. Now, they would be taking AST, and through much research, they had found an adequate source. The Zermanian planet, which was located far beyond what earthly technology could explore from Earth. It took 4 months for a space vessel to travel from XK593 to Zermania. Kay had sent a party to speak with the rulers of the planet and try to come up with an understanding regarding AST, such as how much XK593 would require and how they would consider the ability for them to extract the element, a sign of goodwill, and therefore forge a friendship between the two planets. Kay knew this would be met with less than a desirable response, but he also knew that when he did take the element by force, he could fall back on how he had tried to be diplomatic. He was also aware of the close relationship the Zermanian people had with those of Q, the planet closest to them, a people they were used to trading with and had a solid relationship with for generations. This could not be said of XK593 and Q. It had only been 100 years since their last war, a war that both sides claimed to have won. War between XK593 and their Zermanian people would certainly mean K would also have to battle Q as well. That was okay with him. He had friends too, friends that were loyal and would also benefit from the science. The war was inevitable. There was nowhere that they had found that had the reserves of AST. It was common knowledge across the universe at this point. Battle lines were being drawn, loyalties tested. With that being said, there had been a credible threat made against Kay during his trip to Earth for his daughter's wedding. So, again, Mr. Whitmore asked, "Were you good at your job, Trent? Your time with the military, and then the Force. Were you good at what you were asked to do?" Trent sat in silence. Now the whole thing was making a little more sense. Why he was picked over the hundreds of other experienced hotel managers. Few, if any, had the training he had, seen the things he had seen, and truthfully done the things he had done. He had been asked to do, actually. There was so much he wanted to say to the man sitting across the table, but he held back and only responded, "Yes, sir, I was." Chapter 40, The Threat. The dossier that Trent had been given was not thick, but it also contained no fluff. Every sentence was telling of a threat that was most certainly real, a threat that Trent had only heard of the day earlier. Now sitting in his study, which was located on the top floor of their home, with a view of the Universal building across the way. At night the lighting was spectacular, almost distracting, if Trent did not have so much powerful evidence of a threat, of the father, of the bride, and arguably one of the most powerful men in the universe. The gist of the 7 pages, single-spaced, double-sided. 8 weeks ago, an encrypted message had been sent to the UN. In short, it told of a plot to assassinate K during his stay at the lodging place. The message was found to be less than credible, since there was no proof accompanying the warning, and the sender was remaining anonymous. K was told the message, but seemed even less concerned than did the UN. Then, 1 week later, a ship that was believed to be carrying fugitives from the planet Sergi was intercepted. They had not surrendered peacefully, and only one refugee was left alive. That fugitive, with a name Trent was not even going to try to pronounce, was immediately taken to the planet of the 7 Suns, which Trent knows nothing about, other than it doesn't sound like a pleasant place to visit. But it's also the place that housed the worst of the worst from across the universe. After only 3 days, their fugitive made it clear he had information to share. Information he was willing to give up for a promise of better living conditions. The story he told was of secret meetings to eliminate K, which in turn would leave a power vacuum and possibly avoid a war that was sure to happen if K had his wish. The fugitive had no details other than it would take place while he visited Earth. The so-called experts agreed that an attack on a 593 vessel would be pointless due to their advanced tracking, movability, and defense systems. But, unfortunately, they all agreed the lodging place, while it was secure and was afforded plenty of advanced technologies and systems thanks to their friends from other worlds, it was still vulnerable to an attack, either from outside or in. Those words would haunt Trent. He knew how hard it would be to keep his staff, as well as the hundreds of special guests, safe. As he contemplated what he had just read, Stacy came into the room with 2 glasses. "I thought you could use this," she tried to smile, as she handed him his favorite mixed drink. Somehow she just always knew. Chapter 41. Trust. The following morning, William and Trent were in the basement with Leonardo. Trent had decided at some point during the night that he had to share what he had learned with someone. Mr. Whitmore had not told him not to tell anyone directly. Maybe it was supposed to be understood. But Trent also didn't want to be the only active member of the lodge staff that knew the threat. in case something happened to him. So, he chose the two friends he trusted the most, his number two and his new friend from another planet. He expressed the importance of secrecy. Sashes had been removed and left behind on the stairs. Then Trent gave the news to Leonardo and William. Each took it as well as he could have hoped. The only question? What were they going to do? Trent didn't have a complete answer. What he had done so far was he asked Wanda and Wes to take a little more responsibility so he and William could handle another task. They had both agreed eagerly, and Trent was confident they'd make sure things were done well. Plans for the entire property were put on the walls in the small boiler room. They'd be studied, and the three would agree on the most vulnerable points. Then they would address each to the best of their ability without causing too much commotion, if possible. Then the three would be going to Trent's study and going over the guest lists. He had no idea what he was looking for, but it had to be done to see if they could see anything that might jump out as a threat. 5 hours later, they're having lunch. Late lunch, early dinner, at Cosmo's. The three had elected for a table way in the back corner. They had picked it for privacy, but also, to be honest, not even Leonardo was in the mood to talk to anymore, especially about the threat, so instead they each sat in silence, waiting for their food. Finally, Trent just simply said thank you, and looked first at William and then Leonardo. I think today has been successful. Helpful, at least. They had found a couple of points of interest that William would nonchalantly ask Randy, head of security, about over the next couple days. None were easily accessible, but each had potential if one was to try hard enough, and they were far enough off the grid that they may not get as much attention. The guest list, they had found nothing, but in their defense, they had no idea what they were looking for. However, one good thing did come from that. Kay traveled with a very extensive security detail. Someone would always be at his side, and others would be working with the security teams. Leonardo had shed some light on how he traveled, and it made Trent and William feel a little better. Not all the pressure would be on them. Trent had not told his two confidants, but he would be handling one more task himself. He had asked Mr. Whitmore for access to all the staff members' files. Reluctantly, he had agreed, after much debate. Mr. Whitmore insisted the files only be accessed from Trent's office in the Universal Building. That was fine with him. He'd need no distractions, as he took on this tedious task. At 7:30, he kissed the family goodnight, and he headed out. He had told the family over dinner just that there'd be an issue. He'd feel better if he investigated before the guests began to arrive. He stressed it was going to be a long process, and they may not see him until morning. It was as he walked that he sensed someone, ever so slightly rubbing his pant leg. Looking down, he saw a smiling Leonardo, step by step, with him. You will need some company. Humans can't stay up like I can. I once stayed awake 10 days. It was not fun, but it was necessary. Trent did not argue or disagree. He was actually thankful for the company. So, how did you know? It is what Leonardo would do. So I think with Trent and Leonardo heading to the Universal Building to look at the employee files, it's a good place for us to stop today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying the journey. My name is Monty, your host and author, and as always, thank you for listening, and have a great day.